Today I'm going to read a love letter to social work by Liz Sells. This is an inspiring piece written by Liz, battled the life, illness, and the moving narrative offers a very heartfelt reflection as she revisits a journey through social work over the years. Here it goes. I have worked in social care for 35 years, and it is now 25 years since I qualified as a social worker. I find myself tearful as I now have to contemplate retirement on medical grounds due to cancer. I have been on sick leave for 6 months, and I still don't feel fit enough to return. But giving up being a social worker is hard. It has defined me for so many years. It has brought me sadness and joy. I have made so many friends, and I have met so many families and met so many children and young people who have allowed me into their lives. How can I give this up? That's a question from Lizzie. I never meant to be a social worker. I was brought up in care after the death of my parents when I was 5. I wasn't very impressed with social workers I came across, although I do remember one who was kind to us and arranged for me and my brother, who had been placed elsewhere, to meet up on Sundays at her rambling to the house. The subsequent social worker was not so kind and was brought in when I had apparently been naughty. Reading my social work files when I was in my 20s showed sad letters from my foster care asking for small amounts of money for clothing, and letters from a teenage me asking for money for school books, with a response saying I now had a Sunday job and should pay my own way. Reading my social work file didn't make me enormous of social work profession. It was a judgment and often unkind, calling my dad the putative father because my parents had been unmarried, and suggested that at 6 years old, I had barrackroom language that I had brought from home, never considering that teenage boys in the Dickensian children's home I was living in at the time took great pleasure in teaching a little 6-year-old girl every swear word they knew. I went off to university at 18, something fairly unusual at the time, something only my brothers had done before in the local authority, I was told at the time. I didn't have any particular yearning to be at uni, but I realized I could move 500 miles away from my controlling elderly foster carer, and off I went. I was supposed to be studying French, but soon I found I was behind my peers as my day trip to pathology didn't really match the years spent working abroad or the long holidays if France of my fellow students. I switched to psychology and got heavily involved in student politics. I hadn't been very political at school, but I think university showed me there were other underdogs and other worse off than me, and I could do something to change things. So I argued with right-wing students. I collected for the minors. I marched against apartheid, collected for the ANC, culminating in a brief speech at NASA's national conference, calling for a minute of silence for Nelson Mandela, who was at that time still imprisoned in Robben Island. I managed to escape through my finals and was elected to the student union as the education and welfare officer. I enjoyed advising and campaigning on welfare rights and wrote a booklet of housing advice. So when that year was over, I applied to any job that seemed to be related to welfare rights. One job I applied for was as the education welfare officer for now long gone Inner London Educational Authority. I didn't really know what the job was about, and I didn't really want to be in London, but I used the interview as a way to recap the cost of visiting friends in London, but I got the job, and so I moved to London to a grubby flat shared at the top of the elderly Polish lady's house in Brixton. At the time, ILEA had appointed a large number of education welfare officers so we had a 2-week training course. The second week, a speaker came along who told us that IELE wanted to change educational welfare into a social work service for school-aged children and wanted to change our job titles to educational social workers. I can remember that moment sitting there thinking, what have I done? A social worker? I didn't want to be a social worker, but it was too late to go back now. I had a job, I had moved to London, so I had to get on with it. I met amazing people in the first social work job, my colleagues, and also families in grotty hotel rooms who were there because they were homeless or fleeing domestic violence, families newly arrived from Bangladesh struggling to understand the educational system, single parents whose homes were invaded by cockroaches from the estate central heating system, young Black teenagers being coerced into lifestyles their mothers were desperately trying to pull them back from. I also discovered that I really enjoyed working with teenagers, particularly those often seen as more challenging, and really enjoyed working with boys. A surprise to my feminist younger self, I had been a very quiet, withdrawn teenager who hadn't really been allowed to have an adolescence until I got to uni. But there was something in those teenagers that made us click. My love of working with the challenging teenagers hadn't gone. I still reach out to them, even though now I am more of a mother or a grandmother to them. than the slightly elder peer, my early days in social care. I never meant to be a social worker. I didn't have a mission as a caregiver to make things better for others because I had been in care myself. But it made me listen to troubled young people and advocate for them and enjoy their company. I have a long list in my head of children I have worked with that I really wish I could have taken home with me, dating from the early 1980s to only 6 months ago. From education welfare, I moved on to what was then called intermediate treatment, which aimed to offer alternative to care and custody for young people. It was a rather pompous name for a wide range of creative services for troubled young people that no longer exist. I started at a day program in Peckham, and I think it was the best job I have had. There were some hairy moments, such as avoiding having a fire extinguisher thrown at me, but also to many moments of joy as we saw the young people progress and develop from being able to do math problems or being able to write using a computer to being able to mountain bike in Oxley's Woods. I remember taking a group of them away to Derbyshire, I think, and successfully managed to complete 100 foot upsail. One of the boys who always called me Gel was so impressed as he had been so too scared to do it that he called me darling after that. From there, I went to North London Borough and spent 7 years working with young people and their families. They weren't the current restriction of only working with a family for 6 weeks or 3 months, but we were able to mentor young people as long as they needed, often for years. There was joy when a homeless young man who attended our weekly drop-in and had spent hours fruitlessly trying to teach me to play chess finally told me he was gay and told me the whole story about how he had become homeless. There was joy when a young woman I had worked with had their first child and managed to set up a flat and keep a baby. There was immense sadness when a young man died after inhaling the accelerated from an extinguisher, and another died after falling into railways. I had kept thinking that working in social care was temporary, but I finally gave in and realized that social work was my life and I needed to qualify. So I completed my diploma in social work whilst still working. My placement in neighborhoods office focused on child protection work, despite being on Holloway Road at 10 o'clock at night with a woman experiencing a mental health crisis and then having to leave home the following morning at 7:30 in order to take her children to school from her grandmother. I enjoyed child protection work and decided it was time to branch out from working with the teenagers and move to Central London to be a full-time child family social worker. I loved working in Central London. I learned so much from the families I worked with who organized from all over the world. Being on duty, you never know what language you would need each day. There were some low points, a family who pointed the bloodshot foot of their dead pet rabbit into the living room. War was for luck and was unpleasant to say the least, but mostly I listened and learned from families trying to make new lives for themselves, and I enjoyed sharing spicy tea with them. A short footnote: I know lots of social workers who won't accept a cup of tea from families, but I always believed you should accept what was offered to you, even if it is only a glass of water. No family wanted to be visited by a social worker. There is always some level of shame that needs to help, that you need help or intervention from outside your family. And offering a tea, coffee, or is a way of leveling up the power relationship for them. So please accept what is offered. I was also the social worker for two brothers whose mom was dying from AIDS-related illness. Contracted, she thought when she had been raped by prison guard on her journey from Uganda. Speaking to her the day before she died and her entrusting her boys to me was one of the most moving moments of my working life. The day she died and I had to tell her sons has had. I remember the day a social worker came to see me and tell me my mom had died. I made sure the boys were okay and took them to the funeral a month later. I cracked 6 weeks out of work, nursing my mental health. I was able to return to work and return to supporting the boys. The plan was to reunite them with families in Uganda. I became pregnant with my first child and handed the boys over to my lovely colleague, friend, Cynthia, who took them to Uganda and settled them with family and set them up in school. I often think about them and they wondered if I would ever meet them again. My friend Cynthia, godmother to my eldest, sadly died of cancer way too soon. She was so full of love and life, gone so early. We are getting nearer to the present. I moved to the leafy suburbs whilst on maternity leave to be nearer my mother-in-law, the only grandparent. Starting work outside of London was a bit of a shock. Nearly all the social workers were white, so were all the families I worked with. I am a white British, but my working life up to then had been with colleagues and service users of many different backgrounds and cultures. I focus on child protection duty, and I know it doesn't sound right, but I enjoyed the buzz of never knowing what was going to be doing each day and meeting each day's new colleague, new challenges. My child mind didn't appreciate the number of times I was late to pick up my son. So often my next child was born, I had a year off work and then moved to fostering where life was more predictable. Children number 3 came and I worked part-time until she started school. It took a while to appreciate the slow pace of fostering and then to understand the depth of work needed in assessing and supporting foster carers. to care for children who had experienced abuse, trauma, and neglect. How did my experience of being foster impacted my work? I think it helped me to see both sides. When foster carers were really struggling and at their wits' end, I could help look from the child's perspective, how they feel, what is going on for them. I had mixed responses as to whether foster carers should know my background. Some colleagues felt that could never tell anyone you had been in care, as it was a shameful secret, and many colleagues I have met over the years didn't feel able to open about being in care. I made the decision to be open about being in care. I never told young people, as I strongly feel that interaction with them is about them, not about me. My experience might help me think about what is going on for them, but they didn't need to hear my story. Social workers, foster carers, colleagues, why should I hide my experience from them? There will always be time when things that happen when working with children and young people in care trigger a memory of feelings, but part of being open about being in care helps to work it through and make sure that my own experience isn't skewing my judgment. I couldn't stay away from teenagers for long and soon became involved in setting up a supported lodging scheme for young people in care and caregivers aged over 16. The carers who came forward and devoted themselves to looking after our young people were and are amazing. They enjoyed teenagers and embraced the challenges they brought, and often provided that last chance of family for young people who had moved many times. I stayed with the scheme for 9 years, and it is one of my proudest achievements. Looking back, I should have stayed, but thought I needed a new challenge, and encouraged by my senior manager, applied for a promotion to manage a child placement team. Unfortunately, my menopause hit with vengeance, and I found myself tearful, anxious on a daily basis. Alongside this, there was a massive restructuring of the whole children's services, and I was moved into commissioning, and after having 5 different managers in a year, I crashed. It was an impossible job, and with my hormones causing me to cry over everything meant I just couldn't face it any longer. After a break off work for 3 months and various medication, I went back to work, but I felt I needed to go back to social work. So since then, I had been managing a caregiver asylum team. It has restored my faith in social work. The personal advisors on my team are hardworking, committed, knowledgeable, and fun. The young people we work with have experienced so much trauma that we can't really imagine happening to us, but they keep on and trying to make the best of their lives. They are awesome, sometimes infuriated by, but mostly inspirational. My children still will tell you that I often neglected them for my work children. They were often the last to be picked up, often crying for me to stay home when I had to go back out to work in the evening. They also got fed up with having to talk about things, asking just to be pushed rather than talk about problems. Restorative justice, solution-focused brief. Therapy therapy, de facto therapy, have all crept into my parenting at times, along with usual heated arguments and slamming doors of family life. It also meant that I was quite happy to embarrassment by teenager son at the skate park, and this crowd of adolescent boys held no fear to me. The kids have grown up to be relatively well balanced despite the neglect. They got stressed and upset just like anyone else, but they seem good at talking through problems and getting on with the challenges that life brings. The kids that I have brought home, I am sure some are doing fine, but some I wish I could have brought home, and maybe I would have made a difference to their lives. I always thought that when I retired from social work and my kids had left home, I would be able to foster and life would have been turned full cycle. Now that isn't going to be possible due to my ill health, but I hope that others keep putting themselves forward for that amazing life affirming challenge. My foster carer wasn't great, but she did her best with a little support and little money. Foster carers I have known have all been different, but they put their lives into the public domain and care for children and young people that are desperate in need of love and care, but often do their best to reject it. So why is this love letter to social work? I'm a social worker. I'm also a caregiver, a mother, a bookworm, a friend, someone living with cancer, and other things. I didn't plan to be a social worker, but I'm also glad the profession found me. My social workers didn't inspire me because became a social worker to become a social worker, but I hope I have inspired some of my children and young people. Sorry, they are always my children and young people rather than children and young people. I have worked with it as safe users to be social workers, also to whatever they dream of being. Social work has defined me. It has helped me to look for the best in people, to look at things from other people's point of view, and believe in it is always worth trying to help people having better lives. Social work has always brought me many friends and amazing colleagues in different places I have worked, and many laughs. It has been a pleasure and a privilege to have life enriched by so many children, young people and their families. Maybe I can carry on a little while. Maybe I can't, but I still will always be a social worker. That's a love letter from Liz Sells. Tell me what you think about social work.